So when I was testing the bleach, I used a non-chlorine bleach on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side I used a regular chlorine bleach, which gave much better responses. This is the acrylic inks sample, which has brighter pigments, and generally speaking, all of the tests that I did in the textures responded better with the acrylic pigments. I felt like they were heavier pigments than the watercolor and more easily affected by the textures. So for this, this was the wet part, and you'd see it really moved the pigment around a lot more than just the water on its own. So this is the final of the acrylic test with the non-chlorine and chlorine bleach. And the bleach did exactly as you'd think it was. It bleached out the color. I put it in, dropped it with an eyedropper in while it was wet, and it really moved the pigment around in the big kind of plumes that you see. It behaved similarly to the way water does when you drop it into watercolor or acrylic, except that the bleach didn't really allow the pigment to move back into that water afterwards. So it moved it away and kept it away. Then I also put some drops of bleach onto the paint when it had already dried or mostly dried. And you can see those as the bleached out marks, more prominent on the right hand side. Now, be careful when you use this because the bleach actually kind of corroded the paper a little bit and made it stand up. It actually affected the paper's integrity. And generally, any of the textures that I've experimented with in these videos, and then there's a bunch more to come because I find this like really fun to do, it pretty much creates a non-archival paper situation. Like sorry, that's my cat. He's annoyed that I'm not paying attention to him. And anyway, so you'll have a kind of a non-archival situation with this. Okay, so just keep that in mind that you may need to, gesso or prime the back or encapsulate it in an acrylic polymer or a varnish of some sort to retain an acid-free quality. Okay. So this is the wet test for the watercolor. This is while it was still drying, where I dropped in the non-chlorine bleach on the left-hand side and the chlorine bleach on the right-hand side. And generally I found it worked less prominently on the watercolor, but still did a good job. And the non-chlorine bleach had more of an effect on the watercolor than it did on the acrylics. And it tended to, in this case, it migrated all the pigment together in little striations and like sediments, which was actually pretty neat. I'd like to experiment with putting the bleach into a sprayer, like a water bottle. That could be pretty cool. This is the final watercolor after it had been dried and it has been scanned. And the non-chlorine bleach had more of a subtle effect, but it still definitely bleached out and moved the pigment around. You can see it on the left-hand side. It's got a little more of a natural flow to it and a little more fractalish, which is kind of neat. On the right-hand side, you can see the chlorine bleach and what it does to the pigment when applied, basically when it's dried. So it bleaches it out. Same thing, it puckered up the paper, so you might want to be careful about that. But overall, pretty interesting effects, definitely not archival.